In Idaho say they have DNA linking Brian Kohberger to the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. But it's not the only DNA that was found at the scene. And could other DNA point to other suspects during the trial? Thanks for joining me for Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Brian Kohberger's murders of those 4 University of Idaho students could begin in the spring of 2025. That's an entire year from now. We know about some of the evidence in the case, but there's still a whole lot we don't know. It's been discussed a lot is DNA. Kohberger maintains he didn't kill Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle in a house off campus in November of 2022. But prosecutors say he's their guy, and the evidence points squarely at him. According to police, was found on the snap of a knife sheath on Maddie Mogen's bed. That DNA profile led to Kohberger being identified as a suspect using genetic genealogy. But Kohberger's defense team said in a court document last year that there are 3 other unknown male DNA profiles that were found at the scene of the murders. 2 were inside the house, and 1 was outside of the house on King Road on a glove. Many people provided DNA during this investigation. One person even had their DNA taken from a discarded cigarette butt. So how big of a deal could unidentified DNA be in Brian Kohberger's trial?
Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is the case of the quadruples that took place on the 13th of November 2022. May the 4 victims rest in peace. Condolence to the families, and may the correct justice be served. The 3 unidentified male DNAs is actually a big thing. We know that this is a party venue. These are college students. They held a lot of parties there. I understand that there will be plenty of male and female DNAs that doesn't belong to the house. But yet again, for the police to have taken those 3 unidentified male DNAs, 2 inside and 1 outside, is very relevant.
This is Law and Crime host, Jonna Spilbor. She's also a defense attorney. Jonna, thanks for coming on. When we first heard about this unidentified DNA last summer, that there were 3 profiles, 2 in the house, 1 on a glove outside, we were all like, wow. That sounds like it could be a big deal. But I also think about a college house as just a giant petri dish full of God knows whose DNA. So what do you think about the defense specifically naming or identifying these 3 sources of male DNA that were never identified or they're unknown?
I think it's a huge deal. And of course, I agree with you that in this type of house, there's going to be a lot of DNA from a lot of different people, right? And it might have gotten there in non-nefarious ways. But when you're dealing with a crime of this magnitude, of this seriousness, which really, and I keep going back to this, really started out as a needle in a haystack type of investigation, then you do want to test all the testable DNA at the crime scene. So this is going to be big, and especially from a defense perspective, if it doesn't get, sort of fettered out pre-trial, you can bet your bottom dollar that this is going to be part of the defense in this case, what we call, kind of flippantly, but it actually has become part of the legal vernacular, the Sadi defense, the some other dude did it defense, a third party defense. This kind of DNA untested would be monumental in this case for the DNA untested would be monumental in this case for the.
I assume that any DNA that they believed was significant, they tried to identify. If there were unknown profiles, the state did, and they may still be doing that. I mean, this was filed last summer. Mm-hmm. And so they talk about in this filing, the defense had said, they got some guy's DNA off of a cigarette butt. They had found that, probably a potential suspect. So there are all kinds of ways to get DNA from people. I'm sure some people surrendered their DNA willingly, said, yeah, swab my cheek, whatever. But going through and looking at all of that, I mean, there's going to be DNA in certain places that could be significant, and the defense could point to that and say, places that could be significant, and the defense could point to that and say, oh, well, this is somebody you don't know about. And it could be anybody who had access to that house.
Correct. And if the defense is given an opportunity to do its own testing, that can happen too, which is sort of, it's weird, right? Because the defense doesn't have an obligation to do that. It's not their burden of proof. You would think, I mean, just let's think about this case for a minute. You would think that the DA, the prosecutor, would want to gather all of the DNA that is available. And as you know, we just talked about, that could be quite a lot. But with that, with the testing and doing the same thing that they applied allegedly to Koberger, they could figure out whether they have the right guy. I mean, that is the crux of this case. It's not enough to prove that a crime has been committed. And frankly, they don't need to prove that. That's obvious. They need to connect the dots. They need to find the right person or people who committed this crime. So the defense is going to be screaming that they want the state to go ahead and test that DNA. And if they don't, then they're going to want their own sample of it to test themselves, guaranteed.
That is interesting. If the prosecutor doesn't turn over the results of the 3 unidentified male DNAs, then Ann Taylor and the defense team have the right to ask for the samples so that they can test it themselves. And that is of huge relevance. Isn't it strange that there was 3 unidentified male DNAs and there were 3 to 4 figures running? There were 4 guys at the band field. They all can't just be a coincidence. Brian Christopher Koberger's DNA was not found at 1122 Kings Road. Besides the touch DNA from the knife sheet. Let's not forget there were many people there. Anyone could have planted it there. Or anyone could have had means of framing somebody else for the crimes. Why did they take 8 hours to call the police? Brian Christopher Koberger is allowed to wear his suits. Judge Hibler said that he would check with the security guards if it's relevant that he wears his suits or not. So I think they confirmed that it was fine. And that's definitely for people to have a more empathy and stop being so biased, because once you have the jail clothes on, it says a lot. And this is a high profile case. I know Kaylee's parents didn't want him to wear suits, which I understand them completely. Because imagine if someone brutally unalived or is being accused of unaliving 4 victims, you wouldn't wish the best for them if he did it. But the question is, did he do it? There's not enough proof to point out the finger at him yet. Yesterday they had the court trial for the death penalty. I don't believe in unaliving someone. I believe it's more effective to lock them up their whole life if they're guilty and let them live the thought of what they have done. Because by unaliving someone, two wrongs doesn't make one right. But I guess, fortunately, we are not the victim's parents, so we don't have much to say in that decision. But I think there should be waiting with such things as the death penalty, because let the trial start. Maybe he's not the person who did this. Maybe he is the person and he had his reasons. But right now there's no motive. There's no targets. I don't understand why he would do these horrific crimes. And if he did it, I believe he could be struggling of mental health illnesses. He suffers of OCD. I'm sure with the weight loss when he was young, the bullying, he could be suffering of anxiety, depression, even more serious mental illnesses. We do not know that because his medical file is on a gag order, which is good actually, because people are already judging him, wanting to execute him, and he could be actually innocent. We never know. That's why everyone's entitled to a fair trial. Otherwise we would be living in a dictatorship country. But I really do understand what the Gongalves family feel about Brian wearing suits. Nothing can bring those 4 beautiful victims back, and it's really sad. But I have questions when it comes to Brian being innocent or guilty. Why was his phone switched off? Why and why? Especially during the times of the crimes. His alibi was that he went to YYY Park. If he went to that park, it closes at 10 p.m. Stargazing, it was too cloudy to be stargazing. Yes, he drives a white Hyundai Elantra, but he drives a 2015 model, not 2011 to 2013. He has no motive that we know of. He has no connections to that house. We saw 4 figures running. There's 3 unidentified male DNAs. So why are people just blaming him? For me, it's more believable that Brian Christopher Kohlberger, the fraternity boys, and the people that knew the 4 victims all did this together. That is what I look into more. Because Brian wouldn't be so quiet and just take 4 quadruples on his hands. They're discussing the death penalty. Why would he just not give up the names of the people who did it? And if he's innocent, then he's just very patient. And if he's guilty, it would make sense. But he's entitled to a fair trial. As for the death penalty, they need to fix their injections, their pharmaceuticals, all their mistakes, because they can't even do. Idaho can't even do a death penalty, I'm sorry to say, right. So before you decide to unalive someone, make sure that your machines and your items and everything is working according to the protocols. And that will take years from now. He's entitled to appeal. People appeal more than 3 times actually. This case is going to take years and years, I believe, before we even find out a bit of what actually happened. But I'm really interested in the 3 unidentified male DNAs. Please like, share, and subscribe.